and welcome to the Bell's Cup podcast. I'm your host, David Bell. And after 2 long weeks, we're finally back with round 6 of the 2025 F1 World Championship, with this week's Grand Prix being held at the Miami International Autodrome in Miami. So, let's get ready for those 5 green lights, and we'll be underway. So, let's kick this week's episode off with the top stories, or the news, over the past couple of weeks since F1 has had its little break. First, I have to give a big congratulations to Papa Max, as him and his partner Kelly Piquet announced the birth of their new baby daughter. Now, for those who don't know if the Piquet name sounds familiar, we're like, yes, Kelly Piquet is the daughter of the French world champion, Nelson Piquet. So, it's kind of unsurprising that Max, I probably would assume he's already got her measured up for helmets and a racing suit, because there's a lot of championship winning blood running through little Lily's veins. Then, in other news, the Mexico City Grand Prix has gotten another 3-year extension. So we're going to be seeing it on the calendar until at least 2028. Then, in other bigger stories, would be around how the drivers are pissed off at Mohammed bin Sulayem around the swearing ban that he's kind of implemented any time or since he became president. Then even Mohammed himself has said there will be changes made to Appendix B, which covers the language the drivers can use on track and on team radios. But drivers like Lewis and even like people like George have said these are just words with no real action behind them. So, kind of not putting words in their mouths, but it basically sounds like they're saying Muhammad's kind of talking shit. They just don't believe him. Then, even with myself, I'm obviously not a racing driver, but my loyalties do lie with the drivers. I personally believe in the freedoms and freedom of expression, regardless of what's said or done. Now, because no one person or governing body should have the power to say what someone else can and can't do, especially when they have no concept of what the drivers go through and the actual risks the drivers face every time they step into the car, because they're basically risking their lives every time they strap themselves in. Then, obviously, this is a more complex issue than what can be covered under a fucking 20-minute podcast. But I'll say it now, I won't be surprised if the FIA have a new president by the start of the 2026 season, or frankly, even sooner. And now, moving on to FP1, and then since this weekend was the sprint weekend, we'll move on to the sprint qualifying as well. Now, before the session even started, the FP1 session, it's kind of strange to see McLaren making such rookie mistakes, but Norris himself was complaining about tools or pieces of kit being left inside the cockpit of his car. Then later that session, we actually found out it was just 2 flashlights that some of the mechanics accidentally left inside his car, which was, again, just rookie mistakes from such a dominant team this season. Then, during the FP1 session in the commentator's box, the team principal of Cadillac, Graham Loudon, was talking about their actual 2026 driver lineup. Now, it sounds like he made an actual conscious decision to say, when he was actually talking about the drivers, to say that it'll be a girl or boy with an American passport in relation to like who they're actually going to sign the drivers. Now, it does sound like they want to sign at least one American driver, but there are talks of, Valtteri Bottas, fucking Perez, all being in the mix for the drivers. But I think the fact that he said girl or boy, now, I think he could be dropping kind of subtle hints to where Cadillac in the future could be signing their first ever female driver in the F1's history. Now, we're obviously not 100% sure on this because the driver lineup hasn't been announced yet, but I'm sure we will find out soon enough what's the crack with their drivers. And hopefully we see a female driver on the grid soon, but we also kind of hope we see Perez back in the car, or Bottas back in the car, or even Ricardo back in the car soon. Even though we'll probably never ever see them again, unfortunately. Then to end the FP1 session, there was a red flag waved around, say, the 4-ish minute mark, in 4-ish minutes left on the time, when Ollie Berman run wide at turn 10, spinning his car out and slamming into the wall. Now, it looks like it was a decent impact in the wall, but it actually looked like there was no real damage to the car itself. But later on, for sprint qualifying, we actually found out from the commentators, and probably the team announced it, that they replaced his right rear suspension. Now, moving on to SQ1. Now, because these are the best drivers in the world, the SQ1 session was relatively uneventful. But on the exit of turn 16, Leclerc had a glancing blow with the wall with his right rear tyre. But with the contact itself, it looks like there was no damage at all done to the car. Then, at the end of that session, we did lose 5 drivers, those being Stroll, Doohan, Tsunoda, Bortoleto, and Berman. Then, after a short break, they started the SQ2 session. With same as before, there was only a couple minor issues. With on the exit of turn 14, Alex Albon ran a bit wide and he scraped the underside of his car while running over the curbing. But the actual damage done to the car, well, frankly, there wasn't really any serious damage that could have or did affect the rest of his session. Then Gasly himself was involved with a decent kind of hit on the exit of turn 16, same as what Leclerc did earlier in the day, which marked the third driver in the same day to hit that corner. Now, something's telling me we're going to be seeing a lot more of that corner, either in the actual sprint race or qualifying or GP. Now, the kind of heartbreak from that second sprint qualifying session was with Carlos Sainz, as he unfortunately got his lap time deleted for exceeding track limits due to him going a wee bit deep into the corner, unlocking both tyres and running wide. Then, unfortunately, because he had his track time deleted, he didn't make it into SQ3. If he didn't get it deleted, he would have made it into the third qualifying session along with his teammate Albon. Then, at the end of the second sprint qualifying session, we lost another 5 drivers, those being Hülkenberg, Ocon, Gasly, Lawson, and again, Sainz. Then, looking at the final sprint qualifying session, or SQ3, there was no real drama during the final session other than the rookie Kimi Antonelli, for the first time in his career, getting pole position. Now, him getting pole position makes him the youngest F1 driver in Formula 1 history to gain a pole position in any race format. Then the closest driver to Kimi, in terms of youngest driver, would have been Sebastian Vettel, who Kimi actually beat by 2.5 years. Then behind Kimi, we have the 2 McLarens, with Piastri in P2, Norris in P3. Now, let's look ahead to the Saturday for the sprint race itself and GP qualifying. And now, when looking into the sprint race itself, is when we get into the really juicy stuff from this weekend. So, before the race even started, our boy Leclerc had a very bad day. So, from the looks of the onboard cameras, it looked like he hit like a standing puddle of water and just hydroplaned straight into the wall, smashed the right side of his car up, and that ended his race before it even started. Then the fact that the rain kind of continued to empty out of the heavens all throughout the sessions really ponders the question why Leclerc was on inters instead of full wets, but that is just a complete mystery to us. But even later in the session, Hamilton himself was complaining why he was on inters. Is that another Ferrari fuck up? Then with Leclerc crashing out before the session started, this marks his worst race start to this year so far. Then once the session itself was actually meant to start, all the cars actually started behind the safety car for a few formation laps to see if the weather was going to improve. But the weather itself actually got worse. So the race director suspended the session for I think about an hour or so for the weather to improve, to hopefully dry out the track, and the weather even on the track itself kind of improving to avoid drivers crashing out, slipping out, or really causing any danger to the drivers, the marshals, or frankly even the spectators as well. Then finally, once the race itself was actually underway, at around say the 8th or ninth lap, there was quite a decent battle between Sainz and Ocon, which was very entertaining for us, the spectators, to watch, as they kind of scrapped back and forth, overtaking each other, being overtaken by the other lap after lap, which from us, the spectators' perspective, that's where we want to see, good, solid racing between the both of them. Because when there's just one team winning all the time, or one driver just constantly winning all the time, it's frankly just a boring sport to watch. Just think back to what happened with Red Bull and Verstappen back in 2023. They won every race bar two. Then even the Mercedes and Hamilton era as well. Then, oh boy, were the last 5 laps of the sprint race pure chaos to watch, which us as the viewers, again, we loved every second of it. With the incidents being Carlos Sainz, when he, on the entrance to the chicane, he clipped his right rear wheel off the wall, taking it off the rim, and sending debris and carbon fibre everywhere, all over that chicane, which it looked like he managed to limp back to the garage, but that immediately ended his race. Then there was that big crash out by Alonso when he was actually hit in the ass by Lawson, but it looks like he tried to overtake on the outside. Hit his rear wheel, broke his rear wheel off. Well, didn't break it off, but sent the tyre off the rim. Spun Alonso out, and he smashed up his car when he crashed into the wall. And surprisingly, I think Lawson was only given like a 5-second penalty for causing a massive crash and ending the race early when he got 5 seconds. Interesting. But that crash brought out the safety car, which basically handed Norris a free pit stop so he could overtake his teammate and moved up into P1. Then other than Alonso's big crash, the other big incidents saw Max hit with a 10-second time penalty for an unsafe release when he contacted Kimi Antonelli, which broke Max's front wing. Well, the left end plate of his front wing. And I don't think Kimi's car was actually damaged at all. But it's so bad to see Max getting hit with so many penalties, even when they're necessarily not his fault. To be fair, obviously he should be penalised for an unsafe release, but the fact that it was Max, it just seems like everybody is going after him when they frankly really shouldn't be. Then at the end of the race, probably saw the more controversial part of the race when and it frankly was a kind of a fucked up thing to see, as cars were driving on the track when the telehandler was out trying to remove Alonso's stricken car. Like, whoever made that decision, do you not remember what happened back in 2015 with Jules Bianchi? When, again, there was a telehandler out on track and in similar wet conditions. Like, yes, we know the cars were driving behind a safety car, but there was still no reason for cars to be out on track. If there's a car blocking the track, throw up a red flag. That just ensures the safety of the drivers and even the marshals themselves. It's like Jules Bianchi's crash was a whole reason why halos were invented, to stop incidences like that. But once the race finally ended under the safety car, we saw our top 3 drivers, with Norris in P1, so he was the actual winner of the race, then Piastri in P2, and Hamilton in P3. Now that the sprint race is over, we can look ahead to qualifying for the actual Miami Grand Prix. So compared to the ending of the sprint race, Q1 for the actual GP qualifying was actually a pretty peaceful session. And I imagine this is because, the drivers are so mentally drained after driving in such adverse conditions literally earlier that day, with the only real reason coming up, or the only real issue arising was with Norris when he tapped the wall again at turn 16. But at the end of the session, we lost another 5 drivers, being Hulkenberg, Alonso, Gasly, Stroll, and Berman. Then, with around 5-ish minutes left of Q2, George Russell was heard on the radio kind of talking to his engineers that he had very little confidence in his car. Now, at the time of him saying that, he was in P12, or P11, sorry. So his kind of lap times kind of confirmed that he was a little iffy with his car, not having 100% confidence in it. But I'm not too sure if it was the car, like the wrong car setups, or he was just being a little bitch about it. But at the end of the session, he did manage to get into P3, which comfortably put him into Q3. Then, with the end of Q3, being a very kind of chilled, again, quality session for the Miami Grand Prix, which I'm kind of happy to see that both Williams drivers managed to get into Q3, with them both placing in P6 and P7. Now, I'm very excited to see where these guys end up this season. They just kind of keep maintaining this upward motion, or upward, fuck me, I can't even speak today, upward momentum, with their drivers bound to be hitting a podium sometime this year, because they just keep getting closer and closer and closer. They need a break. It's bound to happen at some point. Now, at the end of the session, we noticed Daddy is back on top, with Max claiming pole position with a time of 1 minute 26.204. Now, that time in itself marks a new track record around Miami. Then we've got the 2 McLarens following up behind Max, with Norris in P2 and Piastri in P3. Then, with the start of the Miami Grand Prix, from the very beginning, there was action, mainly around Jack Doohan and Liam Lawson again, where Lawson spun Doohan out, but it looks like he tried to overtake him on the outside. Hit his rear wheel. The wheel actually came completely off the rim, and it ended Doohan's race, unfortunately. Now, there was no penalties awarded to Lawson, no time penalties, no stop-and-go penalties, but in the end, karma took over, and Lawson had to retire with the damages to his side pod that were incurred with the contact between him and Doohan. Then the battle between Max and Oscar was actually amazing to see, when it actually looked like it lasted about 10 laps, with Oscar being up Max's ass the whole time. But in the end, Max looked like he outbraked himself, which allowed Oscar to overtake and take the lead. And it looked like he had the lead. Well, it didn't look like he did have the lead right until the very end. Then it just wasn't Ollie Berman's weekend again, whose weekend just didn't go to plan. There was a virtual safety car, or VSC, being deployed because of his power unit actually letting go on him. And from what we've seen on the actual broadcast cameras, there was smoke and fire kind of billowing or pouring out of his exhaust. But with that, he actually managed to park his car up, looked like a turn 8, where there was no red flag needed, no safety car needed, but that did end his race for the weekend. Then Bortoleto was another victim of a bad power unit, with another safety car being deployed, and his car broke on him, and it unfortunately ended his race again prematurely. So it looked like not only the fans, but also the broadcast cameras were kind of fixed on the kind of dilemma that was going on between Leclerc and Hamilton. But as a Ferrari fan, seeing Hamilton being held up by Leclerc is just disappointing to see. It just looks like there's just no cohesion in the team. I know they're on different race strategies, but come on, Hamilton's tires were newer. They weren't newer. They were faster than Leclerc's. So he actually had the opportunity to go and catch Kimi to potentially overtake him and get some extra points, not only for himself, but for the team to get higher standings in the constructors. And then, even over the radio, Hamilton made his thoughts very clear in terms of giving out some sarcastic comments and, frankly, some honest opinions in terms of race strategies and what was actually going on during the race. Then even though the drivers did eventually swap, but it was only after about 3 laps when Hamilton initially wanted to try and get away from him, or away from Leclerc. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about in their debrief after the race, that Hamilton possibly could have caught Kimi if they had swapped sooner. He would have had clear air ahead, more rubber on the tyres, and they possibly couldn't have, or possibly wouldn't have overheated as much as they did. But, it's Ferrari and their shit race strategies. It's something needs to change. These boys are, how many world championships have Ferrari have won? Drivers' championships. They need to get their act together. But with that, the Miami Grand Prix comes to an end. With his 6th career win, Oscar Piastri wins the Miami Grand Prix, and he has increased his lead in the Drivers' Championship. Then even Oscar himself is joined on the podium this weekend by Norris in P2, then Russell in P3. And that will do us for this week's episode of the Bills Club podcast. Now, I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode. If you feel like you've enjoyed, feel free to follow us here on wherever you get your podcasts. And I look forward to talking to you all in around 2 weeks for round 7, or the first of 2 Italian Grand Prix in Imola. Goodbye, everybody.